Today we're joined by Emily Lowe from MoonPay, whose hugely innovative company in a hugely innovative space. She shares her views on where to spend your time, how to be productive, and how to deliver the most as a data team. Let's dive in. Hi, Emily. Welcome to the show. Absolute pleasure to have you on. I'm really keen to talk about MoonPay and the kind of unique challenges you face, technology, people, in the fast-growing company that it is. I think it's got some, real insights for everyone listening. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about you and MoonPay?
Yeah, sure. So I've been with MoonPay for about 3 years now as a director of data. I manage a team of about 15 people, which includes data engineering, data science, as well as machine learning. And yeah, we are firmly embedded within the product engineering, data, and design teams, which means that we work really closely with product. We are a centralized team, though, in the sense that we make sure everyone comes home to the
Yeah,
data team in order to make sure that they are, following a particular career growth framework, etc. Making sure we're doing what we need to do to bring the most value to the business for sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And how long has it taken you to grow to the 15 people in the team?
Yeah, so in the beginning, actually, so we are a startup of sorts. We're about 300 people in total. But in the beginning, actually, I did inherit part of the team. So data engineering was already established, as well as analytics in a lot of ways. And that is key to a lot of the, sort of process that happened, or the progress that happened rather, in the beginning days of MoonPay.
Mm,
And we grew the team sort of organically throughout the past 3 years.
yeah,
We really want to make sure we're building what needs to be done, and we need to make sure we have laser focus, with regard to the things that we need to prioritize. So yeah, I would say the 15 people has more or less been the size of the team since around 2022, and it's by design that that's the case.
yeah, I understand. And
Yeah.
I guess it's probably worth backing up a little bit about MoonPay themselves. Crypto's not everyone's bag still. They might not know what it is and what goes on. And I imagine that the demands on your team has changed significantly as the company's changed and the whole industry that you're in's changed. So yeah, tell us a little bit about the industry and what crypto and MoonPay do.
Yeah, for sure. So MoonPay, we are a ramps product. So what that means is we really bridge the gap between Web 2 and Web 3.
Hmm.
And right now we partner with a lot of other big crypto wallets mostly. So MetaMask, for example, Trust Wallet, Bitcoin.com,
Yeah.
Phantom, they're one of our bigger partners. And we basically facilitate bringing people onto those ecosystems as well.
Hmm.
And we're really just trying to center ourselves as the center of an ecosystem. And we really do deal with it as an ecosystem. So, as an example, I used to work at Coinbase for a few years, and that is an exchange. And the way we can think about exchanges is like a bank. And we are
Yeah.
not a bank. We are very much not that, and nor do we want to be a bank. We are much more like a PayPal. We facilitate, we really want to make sure that people are getting the best experience possible, especially as you said, a lot of people aren't in crypto yet.
Hmm.
And part
Hmm.
of it is because it can be kind of scary. It can be sort of like, oh my gosh, I need to open a wallet and I need to do this, I need to do that. It's
Yeah.
very complicated. So what we've done is basically conflate a lot of that process into one journey. So you come
Yeah.
onto our
Yeah.
site and you come onto our widget, whether it's through a partner or ourselves natively, and you were really able to buy crypto as if it was a product on Amazon, for example, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So it makes it a lot easier. Before, it used to take, I want to say something like 10 steps in order to make sure you could get crypto. And that was even before you did anything with the crypto. That was
Yeah.
just, purely to kind of, transact on the ecosystem. So yeah, that's what we do as a business. But
Hmm. Hmm.
in the history of crypto, especially as it relates to what we consider to be traditional finance, as well as traditional, I guess, everything, right? Traditional culture, traditional
Yeah.
society,
Yeah.
etc., has been mostly how do you call it? Like, it's been pretty obscure for most people. And
Yeah,
what we're
the actual industry and the steps involved. Yeah, in the traditional financial services, I think I describe you as a merchant acquirer. You're dealing with, obviously financial institutions on one side. You've got the, perhaps the B2B, the company, the what you think you're buying from on the other. And
Exactly.
actually, that whole process is not incredibly clear to someone who's just tapping their card in a shop.
Totally.
And kind of one of the things I saw about crypto is that they were the person was kind of exposed to that all of a sudden. Like, oh, here's all this complexity, and starting to think about it, and that's perhaps a little bit of a hurdle just to get involved when you're exposed to all this complication.
100. Exactly. And as well as we're being completely honest, right? I mean, when you're in the weeds of crypto, you're sort of like, oh my God, there's so many opportunities and so much we can be doing in this ecosystem. But for the normal person, let's be completely real, like there isn't that much use case thus far.
Yeah.
And what we're really trying to do is build, a critical mass sort of following of crypto and people who are participating in the ecosystem,
Mm.
so that the future, which is not that far away, to be completely honest, is that you can indeed, going back to Amazon as an example, use crypto to buy
Yeah. Yeah.
things on Amazon. And what happens is that if you know the payment space actually very well, exactly as you said, with acquirers, we need to settle. We need to. There's a lot of things, exactly as you said, that go on under the hood that crypto is going to solve
Mm.
by
Mm.
nature, right? You will not need to wait until your funds settle. You'll not need to wait until you have money in the bank, for example, right? It's literally as much as we can get to that peer to peer,
Managing the
even if the
trade. Yeah.
peers are businesses, which
Mm.
is where we start to kind of enter in this world of just like I think possibilities that we haven't even begun to even think about, which is really
Yeah.
interesting.
And
So
how much of that? So I think that's a really great backdrop for your role and analytics. Yeah, I'm already thinking. Okay, analytics could cover everything from customer acquisition and optimization through to industry trends to payment and settlement and risk. There's just tons of things that it could cover. So give us some idea of what does your team look after and what's its focus at the moment.
Right. So at the moment, we do a lot of, we'll say, traditional product analytics and traditional data
Mm.
practices, let's say. And that includes, optimizing our product to make sure people are going through as we expect them to, making sure UI is nice and that it's easy to use, solving for under the hood problems, of KYC, because we do still live in this world of traditional finance in
Yeah.
which regulators and et cetera, they do require us, and we want to some extent make sure that the people we're serving are good actors and that they're not up to anything nefarious. So that is I would say the majority of the focus right now. But exactly as you said, I think the next sort of foray, so there are a few things that are on the line and on the horizon for us, and that is because of the speed at which crypto is moving. There's also AI, of course, right? When people
Yeah,
talk about
which
AI,
we definitely will get into for sure.
yeah,
So I think one of the nice things I sort of hear talking about this is, on the one hand, startups are innovative spaces for sure. Like they can be like doing very different things to normal organizations. Crypto can be doing very different things to traditional organizations. But when you sort of strip away what's happening inside, it's quite probably reassuring to people listening that it's actually pretty much a normal company. You've still got
exactly.
user demands, you've still got data that you need to
That's
make some insights from. You've still got the kind of very very similar problems.
Yep.
I wonder then, it, you probably attract users who are a little bit more innovative, I would have thought. Do you see any of the demands of your users that are different to some of the other companies you've been in? You've been to some significant, companies,
For sure.
highly growing companies, similar in some senses. But I wonder what your users demand differently, if you see what I mean, from
I
others.
think that's the hardest part, I think, on the data side. So, I mean, there's one part of data where we're trying to optimize and use, descriptive data, historical data to understand how we should be moving forward. But I think the thing that gets really interesting on crypto is that we are also trying at the same time, which is the massive challenge that we're facing at the moment in crypto industry overall, is that there are so many possibilities, and how do we build for a future that we don't really know what
Hmm.
it's going to look like, right? So how do we optimize and future proof ourselves while we're working on our product to understand, okay, but the product is probably not going to look the same in a year from now because the entire landscape is going to have changed. Even though the
Yeah.
past 6 weeks has changed dramatically because of the Trump administration being a lot more crypto friendly, for example, and all these things that are happening in the world that are kind of pushing crypto forward. And so I think a lot of it that what we have to do is find these sweet spots of, you know, wondering what the users need based on historical data,
Hmm.
and also trying to predict in almost like an Apple fashion, right? Because, you know, I think there's always that story about Steve Jobs, right? He came up with the iPhone, and the initial instance, everyone was sort of like, what is this? This is not
Yeah.
necessary. Nobody wants this. And of course, here we are, you know, like not that far along. I think it's been like 15 years since the first iPhone came out. And, you know, I think that's where we're trying to get to, is trying to say,
Hmm.
okay, we know what our users need right now, which is, you know, they want their crypto now. They want to get into the ecosystem with as little barrier as possible.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, okay, but this is just today. So
Yeah.
what does
Exactly.
tomorrow look like for them? And that's the hardest part, because you can't even do user research.
Hmm.
You can't really go ask people like, what do you want? Because they don't even know, especially if they're not deep in the crypto space, right? Like they don't know what they're going to want.
Yeah, there's that old saying, isn't it? Yeah, if you asked horse and cart users what they wanted a faster horse.
That's right.
You can even envisage what the car would look like. So then, when it comes to your technology and your department and obviously what you're trying to build for the company, do you think long term? Do you think short term and agile? Do you think everything got to scale? Like what? How do you go about solving problems? Like how do you go about building what you think the company needs?
Yeah. So we basically have a mindset, or at least I've established on my team, essentially a bifurcation of the time spent on certain problems and certain types of problems, rather.
Hmm.
So we split our time into, ideally, of course, you know, it's not always reaching the ideal, but ideally it's about 20% BAU.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Then we devote about 40% of our time to building. We do approach it with as much sort of rigor as possible. So we have an opportunity sizing framework that my team has created. We also have an impact sizing, you know, sort of idea about how we should prioritize certain problems and their solutions,
Okay.
you know, based on how much value they're going to add. But we also reserve around 40% of our time for research. And this is
Hmm.
where, again, it is a bit of a mix, to be honest, right? So some of it is, again, hey, this is an overarching problem that we've encountered in the past, let's say, year or so, whatever the time span might be, doesn't really matter. How do we make sure that we're researching enough to understand how we can build towards those solutions?
Yeah, yeah,
And then the other half is towards, yeah, looking into the space, thinking, okay, right now, given current events, given where we know we want to be, given our knowledge, the technology that's available to us, what do we need to research? And also, again,
what do we
leading
need
into
to
building
know? Yeah, exactly.
to solve those problems in the
That's
future.
a really interesting breakdown, actually. And those percentages, I think, would be quite fascinating to see across the industry. I suspect, certainly the people I talk to, that's high on the innovation side. As I think you'd expect, your company, the type of company it is, the kind of way you're growing, and looking for opportunities is kind of in your DNA. That's what I think your investors actually want you to be doing. And that's the reality. A lot
For
of
sure.
the kind of more traditional companies the team that I speak to, there's probably precious little budget. I mean, almost none. Like maybe 5% innovation, if they're kind of lucky. And probably as the historical sort of legacy catches up with companies, they might find that they're tipping over into spending more time doing migrations than anything productive at all,
Yes,
which is obviously hugely challenging.
for sure.
Are you dealing with that kind of issue at all, or is that like kind of not
Oh,
not even there?
100%. My team is excellent at what they do, and they're also very fired up, and they're all hungry. And we're also all motivated by having as much business or societal impact, even, right? It goes
Yeah,
beyond business, even. And so I think that's something that is has plagued most, or does plague rather, most data teams.
yeah,
It takes a lot. I'm not gonna lie. Like it's also a daily struggle that I do go through, where sometimes something's come down the line, and I think, should we work on that? I'm not too sure. And I think, you
yeah.
know what? Actually, if I think about this in the concept of, will this bring value, and
Hmm.
how much value would this bring? that is an easy enough answer is also something that I can go to other leaders around the business or the industry even and say, hey, this is why I need you to help me buy in or buy out. That's also sell out is not
Yeah.
the quite the right term.
Not the metaphor you want, but I get the sense, yeah.
Like the opposite of buy-in to make sure that we as a company are going in this direction and we're going there together. So
Yeah,
regardless of whether maybe that's an advantage of being both in crypto as well as a startup is that we need to constantly be innovating. There's absolutely no way we will survive in
if you're not.
terms of the
Yeah.
industry, in terms of as a business, etc., if we do not constantly innovate. I mean, there
Mm, mm,
is probably the trap of like older companies that have been established for many decades potentially. And so
yeah.
they've been established for so long that I think that's where they fall into the trap of like, oh, we just need to keep the lights on. Things are going
Yeah, keep doing what we're doing. There's no risk in that. There's
that's
only
right.
that nimble startup who's going to eat our lunch one day. That's not going to happen. That kind of that sneaks up on you.
Yeah,
It's certainly the kind of Nokia stories, for example.
a hundred
So
percent.
that's kind of like that's really, I think that's kind of a real insight into how you operate and how that you go about making choices. It feels like just saying no isn't really going to cut the mustard. You have to explain yourself. You still have to work with people. How do you go about telling people no? Like, it's really important, but how do you go about telling
Yeah. So full disclosure, I am a reformed people pleaser. So
them?
and it's this journey I'm on personally, and that I know my team is on. And I think that's the thing with data is that everybody in data, regardless of who you are, even if you're a data scientist, even if you're a data engineer, if you're a data, all facets of data, when you start your career, it is inevitable that you are a yes man.
Yeah,
There's
I
absolutely
totally
no
agree.
way. You don't have the context of the business. You don't know what's coming down. It takes a very, strong sort of early career data person, again, depending on, doesn't matter whether you're an engineer, scientist, or what have you, anything in between, to have the wherewithal to understand, wait, should I be doing this? It's
Yeah,
sort of like,
questioning's
okay,
hard, right? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And you also trust, the sort of chain of command in some sense, which is fair
Mm.
enough to be able to do those things. However, I think that the hardest part is when you start to get into mid and senior is where you really do start to notice and also this is something I struggled with myself early in my career because I was
Mm.
like, I'm doing the work. I don't know why I'm not making as much impact as I thought I would or that I would
Yeah.
like to. And it really does boil down to saying no. And it really boils
Mm.
down to saying, oh, actually, like people are not going to hate on me, if I say no
Yeah.
to them. They will if I'm being perceived as being rigid for no reason. But
Yeah,
if I'm
if you're clear about what's instead of the priority, that this is more important, especially if it aligns with the company, it's really hard to go, oh, but my thing's, oh, yeah, actually, I do get what you're saying. You're right. That crucial issue is kind of more important than my little, like,
yeah,
nice to have.
exactly. It's very much a negotiation, right? It should be a discourse and a discussion for sure. And of course,
Mm.
sometimes someone might come down with a request or an idea. They're like, "Hey, I really need you to work this," and then you're sort of like, "Okay, wait, let's go back to exactly what we're trying to do." And sometimes it might not even be the solution that they've requested, which is another thing that one needs to learn, especially in a data role, is
Yeah.
that sometimes because people are quote unquote data driven, they can come down, and this is something I've experienced at every company I've ever been at, is that you have people who are very capable of reading numbers and doing analysis
Mm.
on their own, and they say, hey, this is what I need, and this is dashboard as an example, right? And sort of like, okay. And early in your career, sort of like, I will build this, not a problem. But
Yeah.
later in your career, you need to really say, okay, I'm so sorry, what are the decisions you actually need to make?
Yeah, let's talk it through. Let's step by step it, and the outcome. Like, certainly, I think you're sort of aligned with the way I've seen it. Is that it might end up being better because you do it
Yeah.
together, and you figure out actually what the demand is and what the answer needs to be.
Exactly. Because we all know, especially as data practitioners, especially if you've been on the side of analytics and dashboard, what we call dashboard engineering. We have a joke on my team
Yeah,
about that. We're just like, oh, we're being dashboard engineers again. really nice job.
Classic.
Everyone kind of hates it. I mean, at the beginning, you're excited because you're doing something, right? But
Yeah,
then,
it feels really productive. I mean, you've
yeah,
lit up some pixels. It looks really pretty or whatever. Yeah,
yeah,
but that's no relevance to the problem. Yeah.
no, exactly. And you know that sometimes, there are some certain, dashboards as products that are very useful. And those are the ones that you absolutely need to make sure that you are maintaining and upkeeping, updating, etc.
Mm.
So I would say like 90% of dashboards and 90% of reports just sort of get looked at one time, if you're lucky,
Yeah.
even. Right. It's like I mean, I wrote my master's thesis and I realized at some point, I was like, this is literally going to be read by three people: my supervisor, myself, maybe a family member at the absolute most. And
Yeah.
it's like a dashboard, right? Where
Exactly.
you're just like, wait, hold on. Let me just take a moment and really kind of go back to what exactly I'm trying to do. And so I think that having that mindset of how kind of like, okay, what is the actual problem we're trying to solve here? So
Mm.
dashboards in theory, right, are good if they're being used to make decisions on. And if they're used to sort of, it can be a whole gamut of decisions, right? It can be very low level decisions to high impact decisions, or very massive ones, especially with the exec leadership level, where
Mhm.
you're trying to changing, we'll say, the face or the direction of the company overall over a span of potentially years, let's say. So fair
Yeah.
enough, those dashboards and those sorts of reports are definitely very, very useful.
And
However,
worth the investment, worth the real time on them. Yeah.
yeah, indeed. And there, but then that's also when you go to design those sorts of things, or those sorts of, we'll say, I call them data products, because at the end of the day, that is what they are. And I think it's a
Mm.
disservice to those sorts of that kind of work, and those sorts of work streams, to call them just dashboards.
Yeah. And
But they
that's why
are,
I tend to describe the people looking at those products. I describe them as like your users. Like
yeah,
they are internal, but they are your users. They are. You're trying to satisfy them. You're trying to understand their needs. You should probably, to a degree, be able to tell them what they need on their dashboard as well as they could.
yeah,
You sort of, you're actually building for them and really trying to understand their business.
yes. Yeah, and I think that's also maybe one of the biggest challenges of being in data, is that the higher the more experience you get, the more you realize you're not really even doing data anymore.
Mm.
You have technical expertise in data, which is your superpower. But what you're actually doing is building things for whether it's internal customers or external customers, or a combination of both, in order to make sure that you are fulfilling some requirement or need, regardless of whether that's, again, internal or external. And that requires out of the box thinking, like way more creative
Yeah.
thinking than one would imagine, right? So
Mm.
my
Mm.
background is actually in the humanities. And so I never thought I'd
Yeah.
be in data, but specifically I studied literature.
Huh.
And in my point in my where I'm at in my career right now, I'm just like, oh, this is just really just storytelling. And
Yeah.
everything
And
is just,
when you write a story, you think about who's going to read it, right? Like, who's
yeah,
it for?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And even when we talk about AI products, right? I mean, they are also writing stories. And
Mm.
AI, has the ability, which is a help, to say the least, in terms of the reasoning part, and they can help do a lot of stuff. But at the end of the day, humans are controlling the narrative.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
moment that you pretend as if a machine can do that for a human, that's where we get into this like really gray ethical area, and also we get really philosophical about
And less useful, frankly. It's not making a prediction out of thin air.
no, for sure.
There's probably so I love those insights on how to do data well, how to be a good data leader. That is such great to hear. Uh, Although I have an itch to
Mhm.
go back to the 40% innovation,
Sure. Yeah,
and I, I think the technology. I'm gonna give you a few technologies
sure.
and kind of see what you're investing in or what you think's investing in, and then after I've done a few, maybe just shout out what you're really spending the time on. And the reason I'm doing it this way around is because I see a lot of people spending effort on Iceberg, for example.
Hmm.
So a catalog format, pretty low level, almost. It's really hard to imagine anyone can truly see why they need it yet. Are you investing in Iceberg?
Um, in a sense, yes. But it's with purpose. And we're not doing iceberg in and of itself, but like like the concept essentially of that. And the reason why we are doing that is because we want to make sure that we are unlocking ourselves as a data team to
Yeah.
do really cool stuff.
Yeah. So
So
there's a potential there. I
yeah,
think a lot of people are looking at it as a technology. Okay, if we understand the technology, we might realize the potential. And I can already see that you've got a quite strong idea of, do we need it? What does it have to offer? Like, then working out the balance.
yeah,
I feel like AI is in a similar kind of situation.
totally.
There's a lot of teams investing in it, still in the discovery phase. Are you looking at it as a technology you know what you want to do with it yet, or are you looking at it as a technology you're still investigating? Where are you
Yeah,
at?
so we're investigating in some sense. We've done a couple of projects around, especially like Gen AI and LLM models, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
LLM is also, let's be completely real, not the most appropriate for anything other than LLM.
Yeah,
And so,
yeah,
logic is a bit weird sometimes. So I've seen, sort of some models spit out. I won't say which, but like that one is larger than two. You're sort of like, okay, I can kind of see
yeah,
where you want with that.
exactly. Should be convinced of anything.
Yeah. And of course, they're all prone to hallucination. They're all vary in terms of the level of what they're able to do in certain contexts, right?
Yeah,
So I think that goes back again, once again, not to sort of beat a dead horse, but in terms of what do you need? I think it's
yeah.
very concerning when companies are saying, "Oh, we're doing AI. We're just implementing AI." I'm like, okay, but to what end? And also, just to implement it, as we've all known from using ChatGPT on a personal level, for example, right? That prompts make a huge difference, and it's an
Mm.
art in and of itself to use those sorts of solutions. And so, if you're not able to have a good sense of your own parameters and your own, um, how do you call it? Yeah,
Constraints. Yeah, like
yeah,
what's going on in your system, then you won't get a very good
you're
output.
not gonna get anything. And it's, of course, like the principle of garbage in, garbage out is more applicable,
Mm.
I would say, in AI than anything else. And so, but it's, of course, a tall order, I would say, for most companies to build their own agents by any means whatsoever. That's
Yeah,
definitely not what I'm suggesting. But I think it's totally fine to use off-the-shelf solutions. But again, they need to be in a context of, why are we using this? Like, we can't really just kind of say, we just think we should be doing something like this, right?
yeah,
Because then you
yeah,
kind of go down this rabbit hole that, yeah. And I mean, from a leadership perspective, I can imagine that's also detrimental, because I imagine in large companies, if you do have an innovation space, let's say, or some chance to innovate or understand what these innovative technologies can do for
mm.
you, you do yourself and the company disservice and these tools a disservice by not venturing into it with a lot of deliberate thinking around what it's
Yeah.
supposed to do.
And I
And
get the temptation. I mean, the leadership temptation is to say, I can see on the horizon this world changing technology, and it's advancing incredibly rapidly. So we better just invest in it. We better do something. Like, I can kind of see the reasoning behind, the investment without necessarily a direction. But I think I probably agree with what you're suggesting, is that an innovation, a research department, a focus, let's try and solve this problem, is probably going to have better results than let's do something.
yeah,
It seems obvious, but that's not necessarily how it's communicated to teams. That
no,
it's really, let's try and solve a particular problem.
yeah.
That's
I think there's also less so in tech companies, especially not in crypto. But I've seen, I've been part of a few retail companies in my past, and I think one thing that they're still is an index towards, which is fair. I think from a societal point of view, it is scary, right? When we're talking about AI replacing jobs and all these
mm,
things that are very much real and palpable for a lot of people. I think, though, that a lot of it is not a good reason for most companies, especially older ones, to not venture into the innovation, though. Because
yeah,
another piece as well, like AI it has so many applications. So one of those things is innovation in and of itself, right? Because you can use it for
mm.
research, for example, and help you collate information that otherwise would have taken weeks, potentially even
Yeah,
years to put
yeah.
together. And you can say, "Hey, Gemini, hey, ChatGPT, I want to know more about AI," which
Which
is,
might just help your own thinking about a topic, or take you in a direction that you don't necessarily have the context or understanding of, but with a little bit of help, you can then see forward.
Yeah.
As a team, then, as a data team, are you using AI technologies internally? So today, I mean, this is going to come out in a couple of weeks' time, but today's announcement is that Cursor is the fastest growing company to 100 million. I mean,
Yes.
ridiculous, absolutely
Yeah.
ridiculous growth. I think to me, it says a few different things. What first is that developers are buyers, right?
Hmm.
That has kind of been a fairly well-known thing for a while, but this is amazing evidence of it. The other thing, I suppose, is that it's a relatively thin wrapper around a large language model
Oh,
hosting scenario, and yet there's still a lot more value on top of just chat. So
exactly.
then, what else is there? I mean, there's obviously tons and tons of other applications like that yet to come.
100%.
Yeah, what are you doing in your teams with?
Yeah. So speaking of Cursor, we do use Cursor. There's two things that I want us to be as a data team that fits into this narrative in which we're using Cursor for.
Mm,
Is one, how do I make my own life easier?
yeah,
I'll start with that one. So, how do I make my own life easier? Like, my point of a data team is not to make everyone work 16-hour days, toiling away at coding. It's
yeah.
like really like
Won't have much of a team if you do.
no, exactly, right? And nobody loves, we have like YAML files that we all need to kind of upkeep, and they're such a pain.
Mm,
Nobody likes it. It's also seen as like something that you just need to do, which is obviously the case because otherwise,
drudgery.
it
Yeah,
doesn't
work for the sake
work.
of work. Yeah.
Exactly. But, does anyone wake up in the morning and is like, oh my God, I love writing YAML? Nobody.
I
Absolutely.
think I have met people like that, but it's pretty rare.
It's super rare. I think maybe 0.0001% of the population potentially. But that kind of work in general, right? I mean, I think that's also the thing with AI. And again, I go back to why it is so scary because this idea of what work is going to be dramatically different. But
Mm,
I
mm,
envision a place, and using my team as an example, Cursor, the less time we're spending on writing YAML files, the more we can devote to actually doing something that's of value
yeah,
and
yeah,
adding, to the company and to the industry, to the society. And so that's, I think, where we are going to move more and more towards where engineering, especially and data I'm including in engineering, is going to be a lot less about the structure of your code, the beauty of your code, the way you code, and more about what you're producing and the
yeah.
output of that, which is in theory what it should be anyway. But
You're absolutely right, and I think that is a fabulous point to wrap up on. Yeah, as a prediction and as a where we should be spending our attention, I think that's just perfect.
yeah,
Look for the way to be the most productive. Look,
yeah, I can bring a lot to the table. And I think in terms of there's one piece on the data side, of course, of like developing AI tools and developing AI in of itself, which
mm,
is a whole other thing that we do want to venture into at some point. But we don't even have to go to AI, right? I mean, let's just start with machine learning and
yeah,
algorithms in the classic sense of data science, and that's totally, I think that's something that we absolutely will be doing, and we are doing, and we will be doing more of. The other side is how can we use off the shelf products that are there for us right now
mm,
to make our lives a lot easier so that we can start to build more of that and not exactly toil away at these sort of things that are just,
yeah.
extremely tedious.
Exactly. The repetitive drudgery, the
Yeah,
things that just need to be done in day out. They're perfect things to automate. All right.
precisely.
Well, thank you very much, Emily. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Sure. Thanks for having me.